Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dursey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association, and I am your webcast moderator. Today is Friday, March 20th. It's spring, and we will be hearing the presentation, Transportation Planning Division Orientation. This is a newer type of session that we're having, and I think this is going to be really interesting and to set a good precedence for some initiatives moving forward. For any of your questions, technical questions related to the webcast, you can type those in the questions box in your webcast toolbar there. And for your content questions related to the presentation, again, just type those in the questions box in your webcast toolbar, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. Today's webcast is sponsored by the Transportation Planning Division, so thanks to them for stepping up and joining us today. And I believe they might have another webcast coming down the pipeline here in a few weeks, so watch for that. And thanks to all of our sponsors, our chapters and divisions, for being a part of this and for hosting our sessions. Coming up on your screen is a list of our upcoming webcasts. We do have many more coming in. I'm just waiting for more descriptions and titles so that I can get them loaded up so that you can register for them. But we do have two coming up, one on the 27th of March and then on April 3rd. So be sure to head over to our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast, so that you can register for those sessions. And this is a screenshot of the webcast webpage, and you'll see some tabs up at the top. If you hit prior webcasts, you'll be able to download PDF copies of our previous presentations, and there'll also be a link to our YouTube page. The distance education tab, we have two sessions available for distance education, so on-demand viewing. One is worth 1.5 CM ethics and the other 1.5 CM law. So if you click that distance education tab, you can get more information so that you can view that session. Okay, moving on. Today's session has been approved for 1.5 CM credits for live viewing. You can head over to planning.org and log into your MyAPA account, and from there you can search either by today's title or the event number, which is listed here. And if you forget both of those, just head over to our webcast webpage again. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see that link, and we have the information posted up there for you so that you can get those credits logged. And also, here we go. Like us on Facebook. Just search Planning Webcast on Facebook and we'll pop up there if there's any immediate changes or updates, or we have a new session ready for you to register, you'll find it there. And of course, click the red button on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. We have over 2,500 subscribers right now and over 300 recorded videos available for you to view for free as members of the chapters and divisions of our consortium. So just head over to YouTube and search Planning Webcast and those will pop up. And so of course we are recording today's webcast and it'll be available along with a PDF copy of this session, which will be available on our webcast webpage. And before I turn it over, I just want to acknowledge that with NPC 20, the National Planning Conference of APA, being canceled and many chapter and division events that are being canceled here in the next month, we are opening up extra dates. So if you or someone you know or someone in your chapter or division was planning to speak at one of the NPC sessions or at some type of local event, we're more than willing to host you here on our webcast program. So like I said, normally we do these on Fridays, but I'm going to open up extra dates just depending on what kind of feedback I get from folks. So please reach out to your division or your chapter leadership or directly to me, and we can get you on the schedule so that you can still continue to give your presentations. Okay, with that, I am now going to turn it over to the Transportation Planning Division, who will get us started today. Edson and Gabriella. Edson, I'm turning those controls over to you.
Perfect. Hi, welcome everyone. Let me put this up real quick. Welcome everyone. Like I mentioned, my name is Edson Ibanez, and I am the chapter liaison coordinator for the Transportation Planning Division. I'm also on the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee for APA, as well as for the Colorado chapter. I'm currently working for the City and County of Denver, and have a lot of experience with TOD specific plans, and have worked in transit agencies in the past. Just a little bit about myself. One of the main reasons we're having this specific orientation to talk a little bit about the functions and roles and logistics of the Transportation Planning Division is that within the past few months, we've had specific members, some students as well, and some of the chapter liaisons for the division kind of ask us to put a webinar together to kind of just explain everything in detail, and allow for questions and answers, so that way members and individuals that are interested in joining the division can kind of ask some questions and understand overall how the division works. And so we're gonna deep dive into this, and I'm gonna hand it over right now to Gabby, who is our chair for the Transportation Planning Division, and she is gonna take over. So go ahead, Gabby.
Hi, thank you, Edson. My name again is Gabriela Juarez. I'm the chair for the Transportation Division. I've been in this title for 4 years, entering my 4th year, which is my last term. And I'm really excited to be able to provide this insight. I feel that it is definitely a learning curve when you're trying to not just be involved in APA or the division, but just understanding the structures and the parameters within which we have to work to be able to provide members services, and also just be giving a value to being a member. So a little bit of background on me is that my experience in APA is about 12 years now. I started in leadership with the Los Angeles chapter, the Los Angeles section of the California chapter as the programs coordinator and awards chairperson, which is a big feat with 88 cities in our county. It gets very competitive and very Oscar red carpety. It's fun because planners really get to feel their moment in the spotlight when they're able to have their projects. And so one of the things that I think we want to help give you some resources on is a lot of event management and lessons learned. That part of being in leadership, I think, is not well documented, and resources haven't been sufficiently established for members to be able to access. And it really does make a difference to the quality of the programming that you're able to provide members. And it's also kind of what sucks you into leadership further. After having been serving on the board for the chapter, for the section, I was also on the local host committee for the 2008 Hollywood State Chapter Conference, as well as the 2016 Pasadena State Chapter, where we had to raise a huge amount of money because of the economic downturn. And I was the sponsorships chair. And before that, in between those, I got to serve on the National Planning local host committee for the 2012 Los Angeles conference. If any of you remember, it was a good time. We were able to showcase the city in a way that helped to dispel a lot of our previous stereotypes, and I think people left understanding that cars are not the only mobility option in Los Angeles anymore, and thank God for that. So that has been what has led me into further being involved in divisions, as we've grown partnerships from the chapters to the divisions. And I became a member first of the Latinos in Planning division, and also became involved in leadership and served as the vice chair for Latinos in Planning. and also began my membership diversity with other divisions that I found to be relevant and interesting, and also doing really great work as a division. And that's how I became very active in the transportation and planning division. And my first role was actually the webinar coordinator, so that was super fun, and I got to see Christine on her first day and be able to see her blossom into the excellence that she's brought us to the new levels, with her predecessor, Ben Frost, as a great mentor, I think, to all of us. And I moved on to becoming the vice chair for programs, and then I was elected to be chair. So it's definitely a progression that I recommend, if you're interested in membership, to be able to take steps that help you feel your way through it. We've never really had any kind of structure orientation of this kind, and we'll get into a few more of those details of what we do have available in general, but this is really, like Edson said, structured in a way to give people insight as to how we function and the nuts and bolts. So with that, we will continue forward. So here is our agenda and breakdown. We've got three chunks before we get into your nitty-gritty questions. We're going to have the overview of the division, and then Edson will help us go through the chapter liaison role and resources, and then I'll probably walk us through a lot of the admin dryer materials, but very important functions to be able to really make programming and member services available, along with best practices. Next slide. One more. There we go. So here is a list of the executive board, along with some information about what we have as annual events, our committees, and our programs. So currently we've had less than this executive board members, in the sense that the numbers has changed, and that's really because of our bylaws that we updated last fall. If you recall, you should have gotten a ballot to approve or not approve our new bylaws. The big changes that we made was that we elevated the role that we currently have, that Edson serves as the chapter liaison coordinator, to a vice chair, because of the amount of work and just the year-round commitment that that title carries. And then we merged the secretary and treasurer positions into one, as opposed to having two separate ones, because the level of commitment is a little lesser. It's definitely one of the more introductory positions to have at that level. So if you're looking to ease your way into leadership, that's a really good position to be able to kind of get your bearings with. And then we added the past chair as an official executive board member, and we switched the title of the chair to chair-elect as well. And that really is to help us with transitions and to help new leadership into this role, into their new roles, without feeling overwhelmed. We had some miscommunications in the past few election cycles about having a consolidated election, and the miscommunication was in that the definition of what's consolidated was misconstrued. So essentially, we were given information that all of your electeds had to be on the same year's ballot, as opposed to the election cycle is consolidated into one system and one schedule. In previous years, there wasn't continuity between divisions and chapters and when they would hold elections. It was kind of an independent, everyone chose their own schedules, and it was a lot to manage, as you can imagine. And so they moved us all to a centralized system, but that wasn't clearly communicated to everyone. And so that then put our elections onto one ballot. And so I got very nervous because the potential to have all new people in those positions would set us up to have a really hard learning curve out of the gate. And so that really prompted our bylaw revision, and we were able to establish a staggered set of terms for 3 positions at one time. So the chair-elect, the chair, vice chair for chapter coordination, and the secretary treasurer are on one cycle, and then the remaining vice chairs are on the subsequent year's cycle. So going forward, there will always be an election that members will be voting on for board members, but it'll always be 3 of the total number of board members, as opposed to having to pick a whole new set potentially. So that then, those bylaws also formalized our content in terms of programming and committees in a way that we didn't before. Our previous bylaws were kind of a template document that was very generic. And it also left room for ambiguity and not a lot of accountability built into it. And so those were a lot of the things that we built into the bylaws that we have now. And we also codified in a way what our programs are and our annual event responsibilities. And so you can see a list of those there. Next slide. So here you see the overall organization chart of APA in general. So national consists of hired professional staff in addition to appointed and electeds. And so underneath national, you have 4 buckets of groups that you may have heard of in a kind of referential standpoint throughout some of the emails that you may be getting as a member. So we have the Student Representative Council, we call them the SRC, and they are the student portion of our organization. They have, it's like their student council version, and they have the same amount of voice and voting power as any one of the other professional level groups that you see on the screen. I'm going to skip divisions for a minute and move over to the chapter's President Council, which is referred to as CPC, and this is the group of every chapter's president within APA, and then the AICP commissioners who are also elected. Those are done along with the president's election. So those, when you get your ballots to vote, you're going to have different sections. One will be the national level and regional level members that you're voting into those positions. But then if you're part of a chapter or a division, you're going to also have a list of elected offices that you're going to be voting for within those subsequent groups. So moving back a little bit to Divisions Council, Divisions Council is similar to the Chapter President's Council in that everyone on that council is a current division chair. So you see there that there's division chairs, and then below that, the actual elected, what we refer to as the Divisions Council Executive Committee, DCEC. We, within the chairs, vote to also have this board of directors for the Divisions Council. And they consist of a chair, a treasurer, the vice chair, as well as the past division chair elect, or the immediate past chair for Divisions Council. We like these long titles, don't we? So next slide. So here is a breakdown and org chart of TPD. When I put this together, I was a little surprised at how much is on here and how small the font got. But here we have the division council and the chair. And the chair also serves on special committees. And those special committees are assigned by the division council chair. They range from communications to awards committee to annual report review committee, diversity and inclusion committee, and I'm forgetting a few more, but they're basically our way of being able to communicate across different issues that the division chairs face as a group, and allows us to come up with policies and guidance going forward as a whole, as divisions in general. So within TPD, we have here the different vice chairs listed along with the secretary treasurer and the immediate past chair. So here you can see the breakdown of the responsibilities that each vice chair oversees. And so, you know, one thing to note is the number really doesn't tell you the amount of work that is involved. So if you're thinking about one, just because there's one thing listed under you, that doesn't mean that it's the easiest to do or the least time consuming. It could be that it's that much more time consuming than the ones that have a bunch of others listed there. So under the vice chair of policy, you have the PAC, the PAC, which we abbreviate our acronym to be the Policy Action Advisory Council and Committee, excuse me, and that is made up of volunteers that we have a call for every year to see who's interested in being on that committee. That committee primarily gives advice and consultation and best practices. They usually will do a collective white paper on a topic that we're approached to opine on as professionals within the field and experts. So that is led by our vice chair of policy. The vice chair also oversees the webinars program, and then biannually we have a publication that we abbreviate as well to this SOTP, which is the State of Transportation publication. And what that consists of are cutting edge practices or embarking new technologies or fields within transportation. One of a great example is like micromobility and automated vehicles. So we do a call for articles from professionals, academics that have been exploring or doing new work in that particular field, and they write articles that are then vetted and put together into this publication that we publish it once every other year because it's such a large lift, and it's always released at NPC, which this year won't be at the conference, but we will likely release it on the anniversary date of what would have been our first day of the conference. Moving on to the vice chair of outreach, we have several different groups that they oversee, one being our student paper competition, and that is there's parameters in which you have to be a current student, and your topic has to be cutting edge as well, or at least original research on something transportation related. It's a really fun exercise if you want to be a reviewer. The particular winners that we've had this year had outstanding topics that just were really very impressive, and really gives me, it was really great reading. It was my first time being a reviewer this year, and it was really enjoyable to see the kind of work that students have been putting out. And then those winners are also announced at MPC, which we'll be doing on email instead now. We have our website and social media coordinator and committee. I think it's going to be growing to a committee, especially as we have to transition into being a lot more internet-based. And that really has a lot to do with the fact that we're geographically large and difficult to connect with. We're looking to use those platforms to be more communicative and interactive and engaging with members. And we'll get into that a little bit more later in this presentation. We also have our annual member survey, which tomorrow is the deadline. If you haven't already submitted your survey responses, I haven't yet. I'm going to do that this afternoon. So please fill out your survey. It's really a huge help to help the board understand what kinds of programming and things that the membership would like to see. Many of our ideas, many of our activities and programming and topics that we focus our work on come from the comments that we get out of this survey. And so I can't stress to you enough how important your feedback in that is to us, to help us really give you value for your money and for your time and your attention into this organization. And then last but not least is the YPG committee, which is the Young Planners Group. And that has, if you are a long-timer member, that used to be called our emerging professionals, but then over time we standardized that group across all of the different chapters and APA to be the Young Professionals Group. And so that is a really good place for someone who's just leaving school or starting school and really looking to become interested in leadership, and help us organize kind of the newer people into our field. And young doesn't necessarily mean young in age, it means young in the profession. Okay, so going on to Vice Chapter of Coordination, we have the main role and function, which is Chapter Liaison Coordination. It's a huge job because it requires a lot of accessibility and communication and support to our chapter liaisons, who are the face of the organization, of our membership, to locals, and is their touchstone to being included in a very large group that spans the country. So moving to Vice Chair of Programs, we have the National Planning Conference reception and mixer that unfortunately had to be canceled this year. We have member spotlights, which we've started recently, I think a couple years now. And that's a random selection where we'll reach out to you and ask you 5 standard questions and why you TPD. And we're really excited that we're moving that platform from being a written response to a video, and we're going to be able to have that as part of our list of videos that you can watch on our new YouTube channel. So that's very exciting that we're moving into the new millennium finally on YouTube. One of the new things that we're still sorting through and trying to, I think, as the conference continues to evolve and this new track session presentation, and I think that they're exploring different types of sessions to have at the conference. We have the reviewing of submissions, and we've been able to negotiate having someone from our board be the chair for this track session. And within ourselves, we've selected the Vice Chair of Programs to be that person for our division. And so anything that's transportation related as a submission will be part of the review. And if you're a member of TPD, we give you a few extra points in terms of providing content that is coming from a place of expertise and either a practitioner or academic in that field. And then the other big role that the Vice Chair of Programs has is to be the lead on the FAICP nomination committee. So FAICP is the fellows group, and you're not eligible for it until you've been until you've had your AICP for 15 years. And there's 4 different categories that you can be nominated under. And one is like professional practice, one is leadership. I'm forgetting the others, but you have to really be so excellent in whatever category that you're looking to be nominated in. And you have to be nominated either by your division or your chapter. And so we are given a list of members that become eligible on a biannual basis. So it's every other year as well. And there's a whole application process. And our division hasn't had a whole bunch of experience in this area. It's something that I've grown as we've been moving forward with innovation of how to support our members. And so we've done this process while I've been involved twice before, and it's definitely been something that is a learning curve and has room for improvement. But in this last round, we were able to pair up our nominees with mentors that are FAICP to help guide us through the process together. And it proved to be pretty successful. We've gotten 2 people nominated and accepted, and they're going to be featured. I think I shared that in our March eBlast. Susan Wood and Cynthia Albright, who are just both stellar people, are being inducted this year. So that's a really important thing that is a definite long-term commitment, but one that deserves so much recognition. Okay, so moving on to our Secretary Treasurer position, they are a very essential role of the division's executive board's function in that they help us put together the e-blasts. They also oversee our small grants that we do once a year in the fall. And the small grants consist of different kinds of programming or existing programs or whatever kind of potential new why I'm blanking on the word. If there's an existing or an extension of a transportation program that you're looking to do or a part of, whether it's your own or a part of your work, we support it as much as we can. And it ranges. We've done things that include people getting their registration paid for when their company can't pay for like additional training that's very specific to their role or function. And we don't allow this one to be used for the National Planning Conference registration because that's just too much to try to suss out. There's no, that's too individual. So it's difficult to award something like that. So we base it on the work and how it will be able to provide insight into the transportation field and to our members. So part of the requirements, if you are awarded, is that you would report back what you learned or how the program went or what advancement it provided. And so we have a whole parameter of that. And then the Secretary Treasurer also helps us create the agenda and helps us run our meeting that we won't have this year necessarily. We may consider doing it as a webinar. I don't know. We're still working out the repercussions of this situation. And then lastly, the new immediate past chair role will be really a mentor to the incoming new members on the board, in particular to the chair-elect. And they will be in charge of elections, since that's going to be a continual thing every year. Okay, next slide. So I mentioned that we have the consolidated election schedule. And here we've been able to establish in our bylaws that the certain roles, certain positions are done on a staggered term. So for example, the terms for vice chair of policy, outreach, and programs will be starting on January 1st of even years, which means that they're elected, or they're on the election ballot on odd years. And then the terms for chair-elect, chair, vice chair of chapter coordination, and the secretary treasurer start on January 1st of odd years, so they're on the election ballot on even years. We have a whole schedule that national basically dictates to us in terms of when these things, when the different milestones happen. They're outlined here on this slide. Currently, the elections are technically open if you're interested. We did our call before that to make sure that we were in the schedule correctly and weren't going to miss any deadlines, because a lot of the deadlines in APA from national overlap, and that's been a big challenge for us, because we'll be preparing for MPC, but then elections are that same month that you have to submit for your candidacy, and then the proposals for next year's conference are due at the end of April, the beginning of May, so right after we finished MPC. So it's a really difficult schedule to keep track of, and so we put this forward to help us organize ourselves and alleviate some of the pressure of these overlapping deadlines. Okay, next slide. That's all you, Edson.
So thank you, Gabby, for that. So one of the things that we want to dive into is kind of like the chapter liaison. This is something that the division, the Transportation Planning Division, is charting new waters. So it's not done by any other division. There's roughly over 20 divisions in APA, and they are topical, so they're not like geographically centered like you would have a local chapter or a section. So our members are kind of spread out throughout the whole nation, and so in the past, when we've had member surveys, one of the things that is highlighted in that specific survey is that members want to see more of local representation, either at their state conferences or local events or section events specifically. And so with hearing all those responses from our members, we created the Chapter Liaison program. And within that, one of the things that we strive to do is to have chapter liaisons that serve as points of contact at the local level. And so right now we've been growing this program, and we have about 71 different positions available that we've identified, from the Alabama chapter all the way down to Wyoming chapters. And so and then within that, like we have California, for example, that has individual sections. And so our goal is to fill individuals within those sections to serve and be able to share information between the chapter and the division, as well as help coordinate local events. So in practice, the chapter liaison can help bring the division to local areas through several different types of activities, and that includes creating a presence at the state and chapter conferences. It doesn't have to actually necessarily be APA related. I know specifically here in Colorado, we have the Colorado Transportation Symposium once a year. And so we've had representation at that. So it can be other types of similar conferences, events as well. And one of the things we like to do is help to disseminate information from the division to members in their chapter, in their local sections as well, and provide information to division on events happening at the chapter level, as well as a section level or regional level that they're currently living in. TPD is here to support the chapter liaisons directly and help support other local members with programming in similar nature. So right now we have about 25 individuals that are currently volunteering to be chapter liaisons specifically for their section or chapter, and we're looking to grow that program. And some of those responsibilities, just kind of entailing like a lot of the things that we do, is we have 4 quarterly calls that happen throughout the year, and within that quarterly calls, we have we kind of go over best practices. We talk about specifically what other chapter liaisons are doing now throughout the nation, and then we just kind of share information and ideas with one another during those quarterly calls, and just any types of challenges people might be facing as well. What that practically looks like, specifically for representation, it looks like tabling a specific conference, bringing swag, and us as a division will give you swag, whether that's pins, flags, and then we have these iPhone poppers as well that we were presenting and giving people at different chapter conferences, as well as we do help with organizing and setting up, hosting a reception or a mixer, sponsoring a mobile workshop, and things of that similar nature. What we're really looking for as well is responsiveness of individuals, that they would be responsive to the emails and just being active. So we're looking for individuals that would want to that help with programming and help connecting members. Like I mentioned in our survey, there's a lot of members that want to meet and share, kind of share ideas and what's working in their communities. And so that's kind of what we want to do, is be that bridge. And then we provide a lot of resources. The chapter liaison core, myself, the vice chair of chapter relations, and the chair are all resources that we are on hand, setting up emails, as well as any type of communication that we have. We do have a working document, our best practice guide. In that guide specifically, we break down the purpose, communication. We have a working Google document that we communicate information and events, as well as we have kind of like a best practice of what other chapter liaisons have done in the past few years, whether that's a mobile workshop, hosting a reception or mixer, moderating a session, or how to submit a session, either for their chapter conference or national as well. We have several resources in that best practice guide for you that is ongoing, always being updated. And part of that is we're always having continual communication as well, which we have the quarterly calls, and then we have a midpoint email, which we do in between the quarterly calls, that has a survey that kind of highlights what other chapter liaisons are currently working on or doing, and then things of that nature. And part of another resources that we're doing is we've been actively reaching out to different chapters to provide more of a connection with the chapter. So for example, in California, the California chapter, we've been working closely with the chair of that chapter to kind of help promote the division at local events and at their chapter conference. So they specifically have hired someone to help navigate and connect those resources so that we can have more of a local representation at the individual conference event. And so we are reaching out to different chapters, because I know in the past sometimes it's been difficult to table to basically have a table at these conferences, and then kind of promote the division, and then not only that, but promote sessions that are transportation related at the specific conferences. And so that's one of the things that we are working on, and we need y'all to help for that specifically. And so if you are interested in becoming a chapter liaison or want to learn more about that specifically, my email will be at the end of this, and we can chat about that, and I can share some more information on that. Part of this also with the chapter liaison, we do have a fund request. And so with that specifically is we try, the division have set up specific funds so that we can help with printing any type of material that you want to bring to an event, providing lunch, hosting a reception or mixer so we can provide for foods and appetizers if you're considering hosting an event. And part of that is filling out a fund request form, and we do reimburse you for that, so we do require that you email us your receipts. But part of that is we have you write up a blurb, take some photos, and then we are moving in a direction of putting everything digitally. So it would also, we would want to put your event specifically at our social media, and as well as our e-blast as well. And so we're looking at ways to be creative here and promote the division. And so something that we are doing as well, and it's also on our website, and we're updating that, is that we have our chapter liaisons on our Transportation Planning Division website. And something that we're moving towards is we want to put those up digitally, so that way we can have a video of these chapter liaisons kind of explaining who they are, a little bit of their biography, and so that way you can see who they are. And so that's something that we're moving towards as a division executive board, we've been talking about as well. And so just wanted to just quickly talk about that and the chapter liaison and kind of the programming that goes behind that. So Gabby.
So yes, now this is the really fun part, administrative forms and such. Okay, so this was something that was a big challenge for me and the treasurer last fall when we were trying to do the preparations for our annual budget and report. That happens in the November part of your life of the calendar year. And it has several components. We've shared the budget and annual report on our website, so hopefully you've had a minute to review what that document consists of and the budget outlines. What we're tasked in doing is creating a budget based on our numbers of membership. Our membership numbers, each type of, there's different types of members and they have different fees involved. So there's fees and there's dues. The dues are what you pay to be a member, depending on what kind of member you are. The fees are administrative fees that the division is charged by APA for administrative functions and support. So here you have a breakdown of the types of members as well as how much we are charged in terms of fees. So what's important to be able to make this math work is to understand and have a good projection on our membership amounts, which are quarterly reported to us, but they also have this very complicated system that not everyone has the same renewal schedule. So for example, a lot of students that graduate and move into the new member type of membership, they usually get moved into that next spot sometime in the summer, but it's not a clean break. So we'll have a big drop in 1 quarter of members because they've not renewed to the next level, and it doesn't get reported quickly. It's not a real-time system. And so on a monthly basis, we're given our membership list and contact information, and that's what we use to send our e-blast out, as well as any kind of news that may need to happen in between that time. And we see a huge fluctuation, and it's hard to understand. That was one of the flags that we noticed, is that the fluctuation was kind of not easy to trace. And so all of this is how we ended up diving down this hole of fees and types of members, because they weren't tracking them correctly. And so we've had to really work with staff to try to figure out what wasn't sufficient and how to report it. We're not out of the woods yet, but we are in a better place of, they now understand where the disconnects are. And so we're in the process of trying to get them more clearly defined, and to get a system that reports in a more real-time fashion, so that we can be able to project dues that we can rely on for our budget for the following year. And so it's a very complicated process, especially when you don't have direct access to the information to try to suss it out. So all of that is what we use in part of the exercise of doing our annual report and budget. So the annual report consists of reporting on all of the programs that we provided throughout the year, and also the budget is kind of our forecast of the programming that we want to do in the coming year. And the line items there are where you would find the information for how much money we've allotted for the chapter liaison program, or our swag. So our swag, our outreach chair, vice chair, gets to help us creatively develop year by year. We try to make it something fun, something people want, and so it's not going to always be the same swag, aside from maybe the pins. I think the pins will always be something we'll want to continue forward, but and the badge flags, because those are important to identify one another when you're at a conference. And so we can be very creative with the things that we come up with, as long as they're reasonable, right? And I think we're gonna have a large surplus for next year, so maybe next year's swag will be twice as good because we didn't have to spend that much on this year's swag. But like Edson mentioned, the swag would be stuff that we ship out to the chapter liaison, so that they're able to provide it at events that they're hosting on a local level. So the other source of funding that we do get access to are the DC EC grants. And so they have a communications grant that really helps us offset our MailChimp fees. We do qualify for nonprofit rates, but unfortunately, as a negative to our size, once you're above 5,000 members, you get bumped into a higher level of charges. And so that's also one of the reasons why we definitely are most demanding, for lack of a better word, of good membership numbers, so that we're able to budget accordingly for these costs that are necessary for our operations. But the DCEC understands this and have created a communications grant to help us offset some of those costs. And so the other type of grants that they have are program and product-based grants. Those are grants that are if the division wants to put forward a specific program or develop a resource guide of some kind, we can tap into that fund. There's a whole application process. The DCEC reviews them and awards money accordingly if approved. But that grant has been the grant that we've used for last year's Day of Service and for this year's Day of Service, which is an evolving program at this point. We haven't decided to cancel it just yet. We're still in the thinking phase of potential next steps. So next slide. So from a more organizational standpoint, there's a lot of documents that we have to have and keep track of, and as good planners, we love our spreadsheets. So I've moved us from literally having just a Word doc that someone has to email back and forth over the time that we are on the board to a shared doc folder on Google. And I believe you've all been given access to the chapter liaison folder. Next slide. Yeah, so here you can see our list of folders, even though they're really small. But then you can see where your resources would be. Here's an example, like Edson was saying, we're uploading all the chapter liaison headshots and bios to the website, and this is where we save everything. APA Engage is envisioned to take the place of this Google Share function, but it's still been not totally user transparent to members that are not part of the direct leadership. So we're a little hesitant to shift all of our files over to Engage at this point. I think we need to let Engage work itself out a little bit longer before we can really depend on that as a system. And plus, most people have been exposed to Google Drive and kind of understand how it's set up and functions. So it's a little less of a learning curve on that regard. Next slide. Look at that. It's 11 o'clock or my time. So now we can go ahead and get into our deep dive of questions. Hopefully we can answer them.
Okay. First question. This is okay, you guys, this is the classic question, right? As coming out of, I just finished up my 4-year term as the chair for the New Urbanism Division, and I totally get this. So the question is, the dues for APA and AICP are high. Why should I also have to pay dues for a division? And aside from the pin, what does it do for me? As in, I think the lapel pin that you mentioned.
Yeah, this is a question I essentially started the rabbit hole down with the fees. So I want to say in about 2009, the chapters were able to go through a fee assessment with National to establish those fees that we showed on that previous slide, the $750 and like the $1325, whatever that we're charged. Like, where's that money? So I actually, in that conversation with the accounting folks of National, asked them, how is this number established, and what are those, what is that paying for? Like, what are we being charged for exactly? And the response was that they don't know and don't have the records of how those numbers were established. The notes somehow are not in any of their files. There's been staff turnover, and the money is a sort of bulk rate that pays for the admin staff at National, and the support that they provide us through platforms and such. So I think that there could be a little more clarity as to that, and I think that one of the things that, I'm one of the things I'd like to pursue through Divisions Council before my term is up is an exploration of and having a fees assessment where we're able to, let's revisit the amount and find out, is it too much? Is it not enough? Or should we maybe reconsider how that money is being distributed? So that's definitely a question that I'm asking. I'm not sure that I'm making a lot of friends asking, but I really think it's important to ask because we should be a much more transparent organization.
Thank you. The next question is, I am new to the Transportation Planning Division, although I've been an APA AICP member for ages. What's a good start for getting involved with the division?
Well, there's never a too late to get involved moment, because Lord knows that we need more people to help us through these difficult obstacles of being such a large organization that spans geographically. There's a number. It's really about your interest of what you gravitate towards and your preference. One thing that really it's like, are you an introvert or are you an extrovert? Because if you're an introvert, it may be good to be part of policy committees and or webinar committees of that and that kind of thing. Whereas if you're an extrovert, maybe being a part of the support or committee for chapter liaisons or being your chapter liaison is a really good introduction. I think one thing that I can't stress enough is that when you're in a leadership role, whether you're the editor for the State of Transportation or a webinar coordinator or chapter liaison or the chair, you have to be responsive. To me, that is just the most essential thing, of replying to that email within a day if possible, because that really engages people to know that you're dependable, that you're going to be accountable, and you're going to follow through. You don't really get to meet everyone as we're in our structure. And so the only assurance that you get is maybe a phone call, but that's hard to do because we live in different time zones and I can't do that math. And also, we may find each other at the national conference, we may never, and it's not easy. So really the only thing that you have in these leadership roles within divisions is to be responsive by email. And I'm totally open to finding a better way to be more engaging and more human in this, but it's really hard. But I welcome new ideas in that vein.
And I just want to add on that as well. We understand that this is a volunteer opportunities for individuals, and so we understand that most of the time, like, you're working a full-time job, you have families and responsibilities, and so we just ask individuals to first take a look at their schedule and before like jumping into like a certain type of commitment, because we want to have people to be responsive. And so there's other areas of like, whether that's a student paper competition where you're reviewing kind of those submissions that of the students. I know the eBlast once in a while will have a call for volunteers for several different reasons, and so we do have individuals and members that will volunteer from time to time for certain parts of the year where they say, hey, look, my work schedule is very busy from a certain time of the year. I'm working on certain types of projects at certain times of the year that makes my schedule so much more busy. And so we do just ask people, if you are considering to volunteer, just like to consider your work schedules, your family and life balance. And we do have, like I mentioned, student paper competition that are only at certain times of the year. And so I know like the chapter liaison is kind of like ongoing, but we understand that this is a volunteer as well.
Okay, thanks. Let's just take a minute because I've gotten several of these questions to discuss what the Transportation Planning Division will be doing in response to COVID-19, particularly what are you doing to support those in the transportation industry? You know, we're hearing about all these regional transportation agencies that are going to go bankrupt by summer and are going to need to get bailed out, just like our airliners. And I believe I saw in this week's APA Interact that, I'm looking for it now, that I think there's a free webinar put on by, I don't even know who it is. And they're hosting a webinar It's free, just to discuss transportation and COVID-19 and the practices from other disease outbreaks, and what we can learn from those to try to apply them. And I don't know if you guys are involved with that in any way, but what is your plan at this moment to address all this?
Yeah, I think that that's a really big question. Sorry, my dog is having a moment to be very vocal in this as well. He has strong feelings, as all of us do, about COVID. And I think all of us, I am in particularly a difficult scenario that I've been called to be an emergency services worker. And so I myself am still trying to wrap my brain around the current scenario that we're faced with in Los Angeles. We've as of midnight last night, we're on stay at home, and the governor put us on stay at home at the statewide level as well. So honestly, we don't have an answer to that question right now. I can tell you that it's something I am definitely thinking about and trying to figure out what the best approach would be. One thing I know that we'll likely be doing as APA in general, not just for transportation, but for housing and anything economic development, is supporting legislation that will help support these transit agencies get through this. We've never seen this before in the history of the world, and we're all struggling with how to figure out the best way forward. And I think it's going to take us some time to figure out what we can do, how we can do it, and hopefully be as equitable and sustainable going forward. It's going to be a different day when we're through this, and our entire existence and how we live is going to be completely different than it was 2 months ago.
Absolutely. And our friends here that are listening finished my thoughts because I couldn't remember. It's sponsored by the Transportation Research Board, this upcoming webinar, and it's Monday, March 23rd. Look in your APA Interact email, or just go on planning.org and you can register for that if you're interested. Okay, so next question. And you both just kind of went over this, that there's different opportunities to volunteer that obviously have different time commitments. They're spread across throughout the year. But let's just take the two of you, for example. And I know, Gabriella, because you are the chair, that you spend, I'm sure, the most time out of anyone working on this. But what is your average weekly commitment to the division for both of you?
I'll let Edson go first.
It varies from week to week, so that's kind of very hard to say. But on average, it can be anywhere from like 1 to 3 hours a week, just because of doing all the prep. Some weeks is more, but on average it can be like an hour to 2, leading up to whether we're doing a quarterly call or a midpoint email or talking with the executive board. I know we have a monthly call there. It depends on like when we're getting closer to a specific event, or helping out a specific chapter liaison. At that moment, I'm definitely focused on whatever resources and putting together whatever needs to happen to kind of promote the division at that moment, and I'm definitely putting more hours in. But on a typical week, then when there's not a lot going on, then at that point it's like anywhere between 1 to 3 hours.
For me, it's usually in the 10 to 20 hours a week. And a lot of that is because I see a huge need to bring better accountability from national to our members. And that's just my personal ethic, I think, because I just really believe in the opportunity I have in this role to be the best advocate that I can for our members and to be super accountable, because I don't take lightly the amount of money that people have to put out for this organization. For me, it's a huge hardship to be a part of this professional organization because my job doesn't pay for it. And I take it very seriously. I think Christine can also chime in on answering on her experience in her roles. But, you know, there's been a lot of lack of communication from APA National to division chairs and leadership in the past. And it's angered me quite a bit because I feel like this organization more than any should be super transparent. And I really believe that Joel, our new ED, Executive Director, Joel Abizo, understands that frustration. And I think that he's really committed to helping us turn the ship around. I know that Kurt Christensen definitely does. His term's almost up though, but you know, his voice and his bridge in moving us forward is really important to have these partnerships. And I think too, I'm hoping that when I leave this position, I'll have created some better systems and structures so that the people that come in behind me aren't having to deal with the things that are not really worth our time to spend and figure out 725 versus 745 that we're getting charged, and our accounting isn't current in terms of the financial statements aren't accurate. You know, I'm hoping that I'm cleaning up all of the small things that don't need to be issues going forward, so that the people behind me can focus on really carrying forward more important things and true transparency and really good member services.
Thank you. Well said. Oh, this is a good one. Do you know offhand the distribution of division membership across the various chapters? And I don't know if you have that in front of you or if you can pull that up, or if you just kind of know off the top of your head, kind of maybe what the top and the bottom states are for involvement with the Transportation Planning Division.
I think it's fair to say that the size of the chapter membership is proportionate to their representation in the division. So for example, California is, I think, the largest chapter, and it has the largest number of members in the transportation division. So it's kind of a good ratio rule of thumb. It's probably not 100% accurate, but in general, that's what I've seen over the course of the years I've been involved in leadership in transportation planning division.
I don't have it right on top of in front of me, but I know that, like, for example, California has over 1,000 members. Texas is pretty high up there, close to 400. And the smallest one, I can't remember. I think there was like 10 members in one of the smaller states.
Okay. Next question is, oh, this is good. The new urbanism division, we've had issues with this as well in the past. What are ways that the Transportation Planning Division interacts and collaborates with like organizations, with partner organizations, if at all?
Yeah, we've been making slow progress on this, just because some people's time commitments can't always lend themselves to true coordination, but we have a lot of members in TPD that also are members in APTA, for example, TRB, ITE, and WTS. And so this year we were really excited because we were going to have the Houston section with the Texas chapter of WTS do a joint reception in Houston as part of our programming. And so I am, and I think others are on the board, mindful of the opportunities that we could do joint events with. I think that one of the things that we have tried to do this more with in a local capacity is doing joint webinars, because at least that there's no geographic restriction that you have to be at a certain place at a certain time aside from your computer. But you know, it's a challenge that we haven't perfected, but it's definitely one of the things that we're looking to try to build further as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. Could you both talk a little bit about some of the significant accomplishments of the division?
Edson, do you want to go first?
I would say one of the things is like, well, is the chapter liaison program in itself. Just because, like I mentioned, no other division is doing this, where we're trying to bring more of a local representation at your chapter. And so, like I mentioned, this is uncharted waters, and we've been hearing specifically and taking your feedback from the surveys and try to implement this so that there is more transportation tracks at your chapter conferences. And we're trying to do things that are innovative and creative and be responsive to what you're saying based off our surveys. And so I would say just in general, this program and kind of this webinar is something, as well as some of the members have been asking, I want to understand how everything works and functions and be transparent. So I would say one is like we're trying to be more transparent with fees, of the structure of the executive board, and overall how you can volunteer. I know that's like, since being on the board myself, like that's something that we've been trying to do with the chapter liaison program. And then Gabby, maybe you can talk about some of the other stuff that TBD is doing.
Yeah, I thank you for that, Edson. The chapter liaison program was actually a brainchild of mine as a result of the comments. We were getting people's comments in the survey saying, how do I get to have programming on a local level? And you know, I racked my brain trying to figure that out, and I did come up with this model. And actually, LAP, Latinos in Planning, is starting to do it on a regional level. I think, you know, one of the luxuries that we have being such a large membership is that we can actually have representation at every state. And so that is something that I'm trying really hard to capitalize on, to use our size in our favor. And I think, you know, we did the day of service last year, which was really awesome. I think that it set such a great precedent, and hopefully will motivate people going forward to take that opportunity to make the best of it and be able to leave a mark that improves the community that we're visiting. And I think on sort of a more division level, a chapter division chair level, I hope that I've empowered a lot of my fellow chairs to really question some of the information that they're getting, so that they're able to also be empowered in getting information and making that transparent to their membership. I'm hoping I'm giving that example, and I think it's not something that as a new chair you would understand or think to consider, but it's definitely something that if you see a breadcrumb of these questions being asked, it's a good indicator that maybe someone else has the same question and maybe should be explored further, so that it's clear to everyone. And I think too, just the level of programming that we've been able to really increase over the last 5-6 years has been a really wonderful accomplishment that I think TPD has been recognized for. When I started, we didn't do half as many things. I think the biggest amount of programming were the 6 webinars that we would do a year, and that won an award, and we've come so far since then. And I can't wait to see what the next set of board members brings the division. I think I'm hoping that I'm raising the bar and forcing them to step up their game.
And how should students interact? What can they do?
Oh, students, I love you so much. And I think the challenge that we've had with our students is their inability to be consistent through the year. I understand that it's hard to juggle. You're moving from being a college student to getting into your master's program. Matisse, stop it. Sorry about that. And you're juggling a new chapter of your life, but I think if you're able to be consistent with what you're committing to, like the time commitment and really being accountable, that is something we really need in our YPG group. We've struggled with having consistent communication and having someone that can really step up, and that, if you're willing to do that, we are more than willing to help you come on board and take that on.
Thank you. This will be our last question because I think the pooch needs to go outside. What kind of guides, studies, other documents have been prepared and published to assist local agencies in transportation planning? I'm going to assume that this question is relating these guides and studies, documents, etc., specifically to those that were developed through the Transportation Planning Division. Or do you have some kind of online collection of best practices, anything like that?
Yeah, we publish and have all of the PDFs of the past state of transportation publications that we put forward. And we've, about 6 years ago, we did a peer review for RCC, the rapid, I forget, I'm messing this up. Edson probably can tell me what the name of his agency is, in Colorado. And then we began and weren't able to actually complete a peer review for Houston TxDOT. There was a group called Layons that wanted to get a peer review based on the new freeway expansions that TxDOT has been charged to do. And so we weren't able to complete that one, but the Colorado one, the Denver one, excuse me, is online. If you can't find it, let me know and I can help you find it.
The name for that is the Colorado Transportation Symposium.
Okay, thank you. I think that's going to be it for our questions. Do the two of you have any concluding comments or thoughts before we break?
I know that this was a lot of information and it was a lot of things to consider. Edson is a really good resource. I think that I try to be, at least in a guidance kind of way or in suggestions, or at least I'm always open to think about things in a creative setting and try to build upon that so that we can be a better resource and provide members better services. So I really appreciate that you're a member. I appreciate that you're part of this orientation, and I hope that I've done you proud.
And I just want to thank Christine and the Ohio chapter for hosting this webinar. And we just want to thank everyone on the call. We appreciate your time. I know it's kind of crazy time right now in our nation, and just want to say stay safe, be careful. And if you have any questions or just any comments, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as possible.
Okay, thanks to you both. You both do a great service to our APA community and the transportation community and all of the volunteers for all of our divisions and chapters. Everyone, thanks for joining us. Again, we'll have a copy of this presentation available on our webcast webpage. Just head over to ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. And we are recording this session and we'll post it up on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube and you will find it there. Everyone, have a great weekend. Stay safe, get outside, and we will talk next time. Bye-bye.